just like his coach John Kavanagh has this morning. He said, "Oh, I saw nothing that concerned me. I knew that in the second round we would get the knockout. Nothing I was seeing there concerned me at all." Well, if that's true, John Kavanagh, Conor should fire you immediately.
Alright, so John Kavanagh's fighter, Gunnar Nelson, just got destroyed by Kevin Holland this past weekend, and this gives me the opportunity to talk about something I've wanted to cover for a long time, the myth of John Kavanagh. It has become abundantly clear that for UFC standards, this guy is not a good trainer, and he consistently demonstrates that he's nothing but a one-hit wonder coach. Now, before his defenders start typing furiously in the comments, let's be real here. John is simply an overrated coach who stumbled onto gold when Conor McGregor walked through the doors of SBG Ireland. And it's not just that he's a bad coach, the guy is a complete yes man to the point where it feels like he's grifting his way throughout his career. Not only does this guy improperly train his athletes to the point where they frequently lose against mid-tier UFC competition, we almost never hear him provide any meaningful advice or adjustments in between rounds. Even during times when his fighters are clearly losing or even getting destroyed, according to Kavanagh, they're doing just fine. And yeah, I'll be talking about all this and more throughout this video. When evaluating a coach, the primary metric is their fighters' performances. It's very straightforward. The results matter, especially when you're coaching at the UFC level. And outside of Conor McGregor, who has John successfully guided to genuine UFC level success? The answer is literally nobody, and yes, I include Gunnar Nelson in that, but we'll get into that shortly. Now, I will not deny that the McGregor-Kavanagh partnership was incredibly successful, but here's the thing. Was it really John's coaching that made Conor who he was, or did Conor's natural striking talent and charisma drag John to heights he'd never get to without him? Conor was always going to be a star with or without Kavanagh. Which brings me to my next point. Let's talk about Gunnar Nelson, who trains at SBG Ireland for all of his training camps, and John has been in his corner for all of his UFC fights except for one. Yes, I checked. And sure, Nelson was known as a legitimate grappling talent in the early stages of his career, but he's never been able to break into the upper level of the UFC, and for good reason. He just doesn't have many wrinkles to his game. Nelson had some early momentum, but when matched against decent competition, he almost always fell short, and his most recent loss this past Saturday to Kevin Holland showed just how shallow his skills actually run. Now, to be fair to Gunnar, even though his 10-6 UFC record isn't stellar by any means, this guy has for the most part only lost to quality competition. 4 of his losses were to Damian Maia, Santiago Ponzinibbio, Leon Edwards, and Gilbert Burns, who are obviously all top-level competition. But his other 2 losses to Rick Story and Kevin Holland says a lot more about where he stacks up as a fighter. And seeing as Gunnar's best win in the UFC is maybe Alan Jouban or Albert Tumanov, it just makes it clear that he's the type of guy that will maybe beat mediocre talent, but will always lose to guys that know what they're doing. And it's not just losing fights, it's losing fights in ways that expose glaring gaps in strategy and preparation, 2 areas that directly reflect upon his training and coaching. When Nelson made his UFC debut in 2012, fans were like, cool, this guy has a unique karate striking style and slick jiu-jitsu. Can't wait to see what other skills he'll add to his game. But it's been 13 years and this guy is still fighting exactly the same way without adding anything new to his arsenal. And before you ask, yes, I do blame this on poor training and coaching. It really is the onus of the coaching staff to be able to assess their athletes' skills and abilities so that they can improve upon what they're lacking. And in the case of Nelson, he's still the exact same fighter with the exact same tools from when he entered the UFC. Okay, next we have Johnny Walker, who joined Kavanagh at SBG in 2020 after he lost to Nikita Krylov. I have no idea how or why a Brazilian fighter decided to uproot his life and move to Ireland so that he can train under Kavanagh of all people, but instead of evolving while at SBG, I feel like Walker noticeably regressed. His wild, explosive style turned timid and overly cautious, and it's weird because I do think that Walker was maybe a little bit too wild prior to moving to SBG, but at the same time, his athleticism and dynamic striking were huge parts of his fighting identity. You know, Johnny used to be a bit like Yuri Prohaska, except way worse. Yuri succeeds in the octagon because he's so unorthodox, awkward, and unpredictable to the point where it makes up for whatever technical flaws he may have. And of course, Walker was never ever going to reach the heights that Yuri has, but my point remains, their best qualities as fighters came from the chaos and confusion that they brought into the ring, but that's not the case with Johnny anymore. Sure, he fought more patiently under Kavanagh, but I don't think that that was necessarily a good thing when you consider that his defense was still just as bad, if not worse than it was before. While he was training under Kavanagh, he racked up 4 wins, 4 losses, and 1 no contest, and even though he went on a 3-fight win streak during this time, the guys that he beat were Ion Cutelaba, Paul Craig, and Anthony Smith. So yeah, let's just say that I'm not all that impressed by that level of competition. Interestingly enough, Walker recently announced that he is leaving Kavanagh and SBG for good after his Walker's most recent loss to Volkan Ozdemir, where he got brutally knocked out. So it seems like Walker himself agrees that Kavanagh wasn't the coach that he needed. Because at the end of the day, good coaches tailor their approach to their fighters' strengths, and that really doesn't seem like that was the case with Walker and Kavanagh. Now, those are Kavanagh's 3 best fighters that he's ever coached in order: Conor McGregor, then Gunnar Nelson, then Johnny Walker. In the grand scheme of things, I really wouldn't say that that's all that great of a lineup. Sure, he should take pride in training McGregor, but the fall off in prestige after that is massive. And then if you take a look at the other fighters that John has trained, like Paddy Holohan, Artem Lobov, and Katal Pendred, who all came and went like a fart in the wind, it really just shows how much of a one-hit wonder he's been throughout his coaching career. Now let's talk about the fact that this guy is a total yes man to McGregor. When a fighter reaches a certain level of stardom, it's crucial to have a coach willing to stand their ground, tell their athlete no, and make difficult decisions. We have seen a number of incidents where he fails to give honest feedback, but I'm going to talk about the 2 examples that really stand out to me. Let's take a look at Conor's fights with Dustin Poirier, starting with the rematch. Even though Conor definitely won the first round, it was pretty clear that the calf kicks that Dustin were landing needed to be addressed. But instead of giving some basic advice and telling Conor to be wary about the calf kicks, this was the entirety of Kavanagh's corner advice.
Great round, great round. Backhand up when we're on the way out, yeah? Backhand up when we're on the way out. Yeah. Other than that, keep doing what you're doing.
Of course, hindsight is 20/20, but I feel like most coaches would have expressed to Conor the danger of allowing Dustin to kick his legs as much as he was. Honestly, who knows? If Kavanagh actually did his due diligence and told McGregor to respect the calf kick more, then maybe Conor would have gotten the win. And maybe it wouldn't have changed how the fight actually played out at all, but regardless, it's still a poor coaching moment from John where he overlooked a pivotal aspect in the fight that he was cornering. Now let's take a look at the rubber match. Obviously, this is the fight where Conor was getting destroyed and ended up breaking his leg in the final seconds of the first round. It was definitely a tragic and disappointing ending to the fight, but that doesn't at all take away from the fact that Conor was getting beat up by Dustin both on the feet and on the ground. In the hours following the event, Kavanagh did an interview with Lorisenko where he had this to say about Conor's performance.
At that kind of 2-minute mark, it was reminding me a lot of the New York fight, the Eddie fight, and he predicted it would be a kind of a masterclass like that. And I think it was about the halfway point then, there was an exchange where Dustin landed a good cross and he pushed Conor back 1 or 2 punches, and then there was a clinch. Conor has a very, very strong guillotine. Eventually Dustin got the head free, and then he landed some decent ground and pound. Now, most of them caught on the gloves and the forearms. Afterwards, Conor had no marks, no bruising, swelling, cuts, anything like that. So I think most of them were parried. But so all in all, like up until that point, let's say that's almost 4.5 minutes, I wasn't concerned at all. I was actually really, really happy.
This is an insanely delusional take. The idea that Conor was doing well in this fight, or even okay, is just so utterly brain dead that it makes me seriously doubt that John was even watching the fight. Hearing him downplay the fact that Conor got hurt on the feet to the point where he was forced to clinch and then act like he wasn't getting brutalized on the ground is just ridiculous. Straight up, everything he says about how this fight plays out is just flat out wrong, and it really feels like he's doing all that he can to appease Conor, even if it involves ignoring how terribly the fight was playing out. I'm not the only one that feels this way either. Apart from multitudes of online fans calling out John in his interview for being a yes man who's too afraid of displeasing Conor, Michael Bisping had this to say.
But in terms of Conor McGregor, in terms of the machine and the fan base that he has, and a narrative to twist the situation, just like his coach John Kavanagh has this morning, he said, "Oh, I saw nothing that concerned me. I knew that in the second round we would get the knockout. Nothing I've seen there concerned me at all." Well, if that's true, John Kavanagh, Conor should fire you immediately, because that was very concerning. You were on your back and you were getting dominated, and it was a 10-8 round. That's concerning. You don't want to get your ass kicked. Simple as that, and that's what was happening. Now, the leg break was unfortunate, but as I say, it gives McGregor an excuse.
Look, I get it. It's probably hard to give a performance review of your boss and be completely honest while doing so. And I'm definitely not saying that he should pull an Eric Nixick and start shitting on his fighter. I'm just saying that the guy should grow a pair of balls and actually be honest about how the fight was going instead of whatever this was. Because at best, he comes off like a disingenuous yes man that's looking out for his own personal interests. And at worst, he comes off as an MMA coach who doesn't know a thing about MMA. Anyways, the real issue here is that Kavanagh, without McGregor's natural gifts, hasn't demonstrated that he can produce elite top-level fighters. The handful of fighters that he's brought into the UFC are mid at best, and the rest were unranked nobodies who just took up roster spots. If you compare him with genuinely elite coaches like Trevor Whitman, Javier Mendez, or Mike Brown, these guys consistently mold their fighters into champions or at the very least elite competitors, whereas Kavanagh simply does not have the resume, knowledge, or proven track record at the highest levels of MMA. At the end of the day, John is a perfect example of someone who got lucky with one student who had enough star power and raw talent to carry his entire gym's reputation. If you remove McGregor from the equation, Kavanagh is just another MMA coach whose fighters are truly unremarkable and have zero proven success at the championship level. The UFC is the pinnacle of MMA competition, and to succeed there, coaches need a vast arsenal of tactical knowledge and the ability to develop raw talent into well-rounded fighters. His coaching career peaked with McGregor, who frankly would have thrived under almost any coach, given how driven he was when he was actually a focused competitor. The guy is a product of the right place, right time, and the right fighter. Without Conor, his coaching legacy would be as forgettable as all the UFC crash outs that have come out of his gym. Anyways, that's the video for today. Definitely let me know what you think about John Kavanagh's coaching ability. Is he genuinely overrated, or am I being too harsh? As always, if you like the video, then like the video, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do so. I appreciate you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.